Welcome to Public Forum, a community outreach program produced at North Idaho College on the shores of Lake Coeur d'Alene. Featuring guests from around the globe addressing a wide variety of subjects, Public Forum serves to educate and enlighten. Please join host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart, in welcoming today's guest.
Welcome to our program. We thought, since we're in the middle of another academic year, that we would discuss the status of college students in America today. And in order to carry out our goal of discussing that issue, we're very pleased to welcome to our program Dr. Eric Murray, who is the Vice President of Student Services at North Idaho College. He has been in that position a few months, and we're delighted to have him at North Idaho College. And he comes with very distinguished credentials. He holds a BA degree in psychology as well as a BA in Germanic languages, and he holds a master's and a PhD in psychology, all of those degrees from UCLA. He's also had experience at other colleges before joining us. Dr. Murray, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Tony, for having me.
And I'm so pleased as always to have our two regular panelists, Janelle Burke, who's an attorney in the state of Idaho, and next to her is Erna Reinhardt, who is the Director of Public Relations at North Idaho College, and Janelle will commence today's questioning.
Eric, we want to ask you about the kinds of students that are attending colleges today. I'm one of those people who went from high school to college to a master's program, but then I took a few years off, and sometime later I went back to school again. And so what about the kinds of people who are attending college today? Traditional, non-traditional students, if that's the appropriate term.
Those are the appropriate terms, and it's been interesting over my career because I moved from UCLA to the University of Montana and then over to North Idaho College. And so I've seen a different spectrum of students at each of the institutions that I've been at. One very heavily oriented towards traditional, one that was kind of in between, and then at a community college in North Idaho, it's interesting to see the variety of students that you have. A large portion of college students today are still traditional. The majority of them are. 60–70% of students come right out of high school believing that they need to go to school because that's the norm or that's the standard. Unfortunately, for that 70% of students, that's not an accurate norm to go by. They need to go when they're ready. And so some students will go to school and realize this is too much right now. I need to earn the money to afford it, or I need to get some life experience, or I didn't learn enough in high school to make me prepared for an institution of higher education. So we see more and more non-traditional students coming. And for us, non-traditional is defined as any student over the age of 23. Interestingly, our largest growing segment of students is the senior population, students who are over 60, going back for either courses to help them with their life, cooking, or students who are going back to get the degree that they never got. And for student services, which is a division across the country, we are struggling to make sure that we meet the needs of those non-traditional students, preparing child care for them, working with their work schedule so that we have alternative course schedulings. So you're seeing a larger variety of students these days.
And I suppose you're seeing a lot of people who are going back and making changes in their life.
Sure. Sometimes you go into a career and it's not exactly what you wanted or expected. Or construction, for example. You get someone who's been in construction and you find an area of the world where they've tapped out those opportunities to engage in that occupation, and you have to go back and find something else that you're good at. And so a college or a university helps you to refine your goals and your vision and go back and get the education that you need.
Erna Reinhardt.
Welcome to the show.
Hi, Erna.
Share with us some of the services that are available, Eric. Sometimes people think that they want to go to school, but they're not exactly sure what it is that they want to pursue. They don't know either what's available or what they might be good at or what they want to major in. So share with us. I know in various colleges across the country there are different kinds of services in some of your departments that can help people identify those goals and figure out what it is they want to go into. Share that with us.
I think there are two paths that I would always direct a student to go down. For the more traditional student, the one who is more undecided, to start with your general education requirements, to take a smattering of different classes so that you understand what's available and what's out there, not only within the academic side, but within an occupational side as well, to explore what they're interested in. I think high schools, some do it well and some don't, help students to really understand what occupations, careers are available. There's another student who really knows what they want to do and they're directed. And I think within any college or university, a career services department is a great place to start. People think I should go to admissions first, I need to get into the place, or I should go to advising first and figure out what classes I need. Well, none of that's helpful until you've decided on your career path. Where do you want this education to take you? And career services departments across the country, you can walk in and get an understanding of your personality, get an understanding of your interests, and get numerous avenues to pursue for careers that relate to your particular interest, personality, style. From there, it's a lot easier to back up and decide the classes that you want. If you want to go into social services, taking psychology or sociology, becoming a nurse, are more practical for those interests. If you want to become an attorney, then learning about history and political science or working with judicial programs and law enforcement is a better track to take. So career services, number one. Beyond that, admissions and advising are available at every campus, and those professionals are there to help you tease out exactly where you want to go with your education. You also you have to realize that the very first semester someone starts at a college, you take 4 classes, and you don't have to decide right then. You can take your English and your math, and then from that point on, follow up on your passions.
My question comes from the viewpoint of a political scientist, and
Uh-oh.
I'm going to get very philosophical, if I may. I've been always fascinated by decades. There have been some exciting books written on dealing with changes from decade to decade, and I don't think there have been any college students like those in the 1960s. They were not only majoring in the liberal arts, but they were socially very active and politically active. And the 70s was different, the 80s and 90s. Now we're in a new century, and UCLA did a study on this recently, and it appears that students are becoming more active again. Not to the same extent as the 60s, but moving in that direction. As you are in contact with other universities and colleges and your peers or your colleagues, how would you profile the college students in America today from a philosophical viewpoint? I know a lot of them go to college and they work too, but socially and politically speaking, are we moving more in that trend?
That's a good question. And one I will attempt to answer, but you with your political science background may have just as much knowledge about this as I do. Students certainly are becoming more active, but the focus of their activism is different than the 60s. The focus of their activism is how it will help themselves and their family. And so as you get involved, it's about what's in it for me. And the thought about social justice is not as prevalent as it was 40 years ago. The thought is about individual justice. And what I think builds that perspective is our economy, being able to afford the things that you want, the technology that we have, and those things are related because this generation of student is very technological. To have technology, you also have to be economically well established. To have the computers and the cell phones and the cars that have those abilities and those kinds of things, those things are tied. Not only your interest in technology, but your interest in economics, and then building on that for the future. Every occupation relies on technology. If you're going to become socially active, it's going to be how it's going to affect your community. What I see a lack of is large national activism, which is what I think your generation was focused on.
And even internationally, of course, there were things happening like the Civil Rights Movement and the Vietnam War and all. That's very, very articulate in what you had to say. Just a follow-up question is, what's going on in our nation today and in the world? Of course, the Middle East has been such a hot spot in this serious threat of terrorism. Are all of those things causing students to also maybe to almost try to avoid it, that is, to turn inward and in their own local communities or their family?
I think students find those concepts hard to comprehend. It's the government's job to deal with that and not our job. They're just learning how to get their next paycheck and how to survive and get through their classes and get through this stage and that stage and find the career that you have. When you live in a rural community, you're focused on your rural environment. When you live in a metropolitan community, sometimes you have a broader perspective of things. So I think it's a lack of being engaged in how the issue affects us here. You can go about your day-to-day life in our country without ever being exposed or having to deal with the emotional or security or those concepts that are involved in some of the global issues, global warming or terrorism, especially in the Northwest. Outside of Seattle, we don't feel a threat. And so students don't necessarily pursue activism, consciousness of those areas. It's our job as educators to help make them more aware through our high schools and our colleges that every movement in the world will affect us somehow because we're more of a world community now.
Yes, thank you. Janelle.
There are many, many schools to choose from out there. They really run the gamut. And there are 2-year schools, there are 4-year schools, and students take a number of different paths. What are the factors that you find that students are considering when they decide upon a school?
I love the question because I think we as college administrators are often misguided in what we think a student wants versus the real reasons for them choosing. And I'm going to talk mostly about traditional out-of-high school students because non-traditional students tend to go to the institutions that are within their community. A traditional student, an 18-year-old student, is looking at the whole nation and making decisions. And they're making a decision on a goodness of fit model. What's going to meet my personal needs? If my personal need is to be very health conscious, does your institution have a recreation center? If my personal need is to be engaged in issues of social activism, are you socially engaged? I want to become a police officer. Do you have a program that's going to meet my personal need? I think you have to understand, and my degree in psychology really fits into this, you have to understand adolescent development and where an 18, 19, and 20-year-old is. That's late adolescence. They're still trying to decide their identity. They're still trying to become autonomous from their parents. They're still trying to establish what their career goals are. And so we as administrators think we need to have every service, and it has to be the best service out there, and we have to get out to every school, and we have to have, the flowers have to be blooming, and all of those kinds of things. Those are all important, but a student decides on a college by how well they think their academic program is going to meet their long-term needs. And so as a student comes to campus, my goal is to try to engage them with a faculty member of their choosing, of their interest. They want to know how their schooling is going to help them in the long run. And if you've got a rec center, great. And if you've got great housing, perfect. But students don't make decisions based on the services that the campus provides. They make decisions on the programs that the campus provides. And I think that's a common mistake among administrators. They try to boost their services without realizing it's the programs which attract a student to your school. And they're ultimately going to go there because they feel comfortable there. I have a student I'm working with who is currently at the University of Hawaii and is going to be moving over here to North Idaho College next semester. And the reason is Hawaii wasn't a good fit. University, all of these services, great weather, but you know what? They didn't feel the personal connection. And so they want to move to a place where they'll work on their classes and they'll feel engaged with the faculty.
Thank you.
Ernest Reinhardt.
You just touched on this a little bit, but maybe you could expound on this, Eric. I want to talk to you a little bit about student success and what are some of the factors that the research is telling you that is a key to student success. What kind of things does the student need to do to be a successful student?
One is to have certain academic skill. And this is a huge struggle for a non-traditional student who's been out of school for a while to get back up to speed in math and in writing and in public speaking. Our high schools are struggling with getting students well prepared for entry-level courses. 80% of our students are underprepared in math. That's a huge issue for student success, is their preparedness academically. There's also some preparation that a student needs to do mentally. Am I prepared to live on my own? Even though the drinking age is 21 in our country, a lot of students think that leaving high school as an 18-year-old is the freedom to explore issues of alcohol and dating, and they focus on those things because they're more attractive to them than going to class in the morning. And so self-discipline is a huge factor in student success. You have to be able to go to a college, sit down, do your homework, go to your classes. Even just simple attendance is important, and that self-discipline is there. And you have to have balance. You have to balance your work, your school, and your social life. And students aren't trained in that balance. In high school, you go to school and it's regimented, and then afterwards you have your extracurricular activity or your homework. And then typically parents have curfews. So the training for balancing those aspects of life aren't there. That's a huge issue for student success. Training in life skills and then also training in academic skills.
Great.
I'm not a philosopher, but I will attempt to question the area.
I think you do pretty well at philosophy, Tony.
You're always very kind. One of the things that I've discussed with some of my colleagues around the country, and of great concern in our audience in Canada would appreciate this also, we, through technology that you mentioned earlier, we are providing a revolution in education, and there are many individuals that can receive an associate degree or even a baccalaureate degree and be on campus very little. They can sit at home at the computer and take all these courses, computer classes. But I think over the long run, this has a real social consequence in a society, that the social intermingling has been a crucial part of at least the university and college campus. And colleagues that you've talked to, do they have the same kind of concern, or how do you react to this tremendous change in the exposure individuals have or do not have and becoming more isolated, and does it affect their social skills?
Certainly. As a psychologist, I know it affects their social skills. But I happen to be caught between two large movements. One that has a very traditional view that social engagement, being able to mentor and teach, and the human contact is extremely important to education. And another that believes that technology is how everything will be done in the future. And to a certain extent, that's true. Where I get caught is how much, I wish I could see 100 years into the future and understand just the role that technology is going to play. I still believe in the human model, in that interacting with somebody one-on-one, face-to-face, you pick up emotion and you pick up intonation. You know when I'm emphasizing something. But when I'm typing in a chat room online and teaching you about some kind of psychological mechanism, you can't hear my intonation and know what I'm stressing and what's important. When you have a question, it's a lot harder to answer, and it takes time and patience. Another part of the technology is it takes top-notch reading skills. If you are an oral learner as opposed to a visual learner, then technology isn't necessarily the right medium. Podcasts are becoming more and more available on college campuses, and you can pick up your iPod and you can hear the lecture or you can see the lecture, and that's just another way that technology is trying to meet the different learning needs. We are struggling, all college campuses are struggling between wanting the student on campus and trying to deliver to a student via technology. And there's a theoretical principle involved there, just the effect of learning and the human touch. There's also a very practical principle in there, and that college campuses can't survive. They're going to meet a maximum level of the number of students that they can serve in one physical location. And so they've all turned to offering classes online so that they can reach rural populations, people who aren't going to be able to come to campus. And that has a huge financial impact for a college. They want those students, and they want to reach out to every student.
I guess I just have a follow-up question. So we have two kinds of college students that we're producing in at least the academic world, and that is we'll have the students who spend 4 years on campus, or maybe even more, in addition to their classes, and interchange with the faculty and other students. And they go to live theater productions and great concerts and lectures on campus and all that. And then you have this other student who's at a more distance in a rural area, and they get the degree too. Those two students aren't going to have the same kind of degree, and what kind of emphasis we put on that. And also, if we're considering admission to law school or medical school or dental school, etc., how does that graduate school make a determination between those students, and the GPAs will not be the only criteria?
At the moment, it's difficult for schools to make a determination on the type of education that you get. They see the degree and they see the grades, and not always will they know that those were delivered online. And so there is no differentiation right now unless you really look into a student's background. Is it going to change their skill set? Absolutely. And I think it's too early to tell just how effective the in-class learning versus the online learning is going to be in the actual occupational skills of a student in the long run. I don't know what the research says on it. I think there's going to be a difference, and I think some graduate student somewhere would probably study it. I did a very small, it's more anecdotal study, but at the last institution where I worked in Montana, I talked to several of our students who had gotten their business degree online and several students who had done it via the classes that we offered on campus. Content-wise, they said there was no difference, that they both learned the same content within their particular degree, but that it was a learning style difference. For a business degree, maybe that's okay, but for a profession where you have to have application, nursing, psychology, law enforcement, there might be some substantial differences.
Thank you. Janelle Burke.
Eric, you've been in a number of locations. You were in a very urban campus at UCLA, and you've been in some rural campuses. And please talk to us about what is the choice that a person might make. How do they find that they fit within one of these particular types of institutions? And then we also have, of course, the very large institution like UCLA, as opposed to a smaller institution.
Sure.
So it's a small, large, the town and gown locations. So do you...
Campus visitation is the #1 indicator of whether a college is right for you. When a student comes to a campus and we ask, what convinced you that this was the right place for you? The visitation was there because they get a feel for if it's a comfortable place for them or not, if the size is manageable for them. Now, my older brother went to a 1,000 person institution and I went to a 30,000 person institution. My personality was better suited towards the larger environment and getting involved and being active, whereas his personality was better suited for the individual contact, the small class size. Again, it comes back down to goodness of fit. I then think once you get to that place, so many students transfer from their initial choice these days because they realize it's just not where they feel comfortable. A current study talks about how high school students these days feel that social bond. Let me rephrase. High school students from rural areas have this social bond that is so important to them. And when they leave that bond and they go out of state or to a larger institution, they don't feel the support they have. And they have to invest years to develop those friendships again. And you often find students from rural areas venturing out, experiencing something, and then coming back. And so I think it's exploration. It's looking what's the best fit for you and where you feel the most comfortable. You're going to learn better when you're in an environment where you feel the most comfortable. And it's very hard to predict trends for students. You have a small set of students who go to institutions because of their reputation, the top 25, the Harvards and the Yales. But most of our students go to regional institutions where they can afford to go be close to their social environments and really feel engaged in the kind of education that they're getting.
Thank you.
All right, Reinhardt.
Share with us, Eric, what some of the greatest challenges are for students today that you see. One or two of the greatest challenges. What are they struggling with?
Being new at NIC, everybody has kept saying, what's the biggest challenge that you're experiencing? And it's like, oh, okay, now I got to think from the perspective of a student.
I hope that list is not too long.
Being new at an institution this size, there are lots of things to get accomplished. Finances is probably the #1 issue for students. How do I afford to go to a school? And you look at a community college environment and it's very inexpensive comparatively to go to a community college. It's a great deal. You can spend $8,000 going to a university in your first year and $2,000 going to a community college, and you're probably going to get the same quality of education. You can then transfer from a community college onto a larger institution, have saved several $1,000s, and be more successful. But even the students here at North Idaho College, community college in our area, are struggling financially. For the most needy students, financial aid will cover tuition, but it doesn't cover those living expenses associated with spending all of your waking hours studying and going to class. Rent, groceries, insurance. Students don't believe they can live without their cell phones or their wireless these days.
Even in class.
Even in class. And so I think they struggle with balancing. And I don't think parents have set aside the money appropriate to send their student to college because they're also struggling financially to keep up with the demands for day to day. You'll find a lot more older students coming back because they've taken some time out, they've earned the money or saved the money to be able to afford the education that they really want. And that's an okay move, to spend 3, 4, or 5 years getting some real life experience and then coming back and being able to afford the education that you want. I think that's the biggest struggle for students. The biggest challenge is how to balance the financial aspect.
Great.
I've had the privilege on more than one occasion taking students to Europe for study and for a month, and they receive credits. And the educational system, higher education system, is very different in Europe and somewhat in Canada also. One of the examples would be that in many of the universities in Europe, the reading assignment's much larger. Here you read a lot of books in one class, and the professor often doesn't just follow a certain syllabi by subs. They move around a lot, and you're on your own more in reading. How do you compare that system with the one we have? We have much more structured and methodical process through courses. Would you like to react to that?
Varying opinions. I was a student in Europe.
So you know what I talk about.
Yeah, I was both a high school and a college student in Germany. And so I understand the way things are taught there. The struggles are different there. Each student still struggles with academic success, no matter what the system is or what the requirements are. I personally have a belief in experiential education, so that reading certainly is important to be well-rounded and well-versed. But there's a difference in understanding a body of facts versus understanding how to problem solve. And I think experiential education helps you in the application and how to walk into an environment, apply the skills that you are learning or have learned to problem solve, to move ahead. The reading background is great, but not everybody is a reader. And I think there has to be a balanced approach. Students have to be strong in multiple areas. And I think if you look at our Asian counterparts as opposed to our European counterparts, you're going to find a lot more emphasis on reading and math. And likewise, the engineers of the world and those people who are well-versed in literature, you're finding that the Asian populations tend to score higher in those areas.
We've out of time, but I wish we could continue. Actually, what you just said would also apply again to those on campus learning and those doing computer classes. This goes on and on. I loved your statement about you wish you could see 100 years from now. I too, and it'd be nice to be here in 100 years to see what's happening.
I plan to be, Tony, but...
I am delighted to meet someone that'll be about 140 years old. So thank you. On behalf of our panel and our staff, you've been wonderful with your answers, and it's been so informative. And I know our viewers have been informed in a very, very significant way, and we hope you'll come back at some later time.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've been so pleased to present to you an interview with Dr. Eric Murray, who's the Vice President of Student Services at North Idaho College, and today's topic has been dealing with the status of college students in America today, and of course we have made some comparison with other countries. I hope you'll be with us again next week at this same time when we will discuss yet another issue. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
Recorded on the campus of North Idaho College, Public Forum is the longest-running in-house college production on PBS. Each episode is pre-recorded live and is an educational outreach from North Idaho College. Please join us at this same time next week for another edition of Public Forum on this public television station.